don't want people thinking they have to take days and days and days to do an oil painting, and like you have to stop at this point. No, 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 no. Me and Richard Schmid do alla prima painting. But if you have to take a break, this is the time to do it because everything here is dry. So now I'm going to start doing some light opaque stuff on top of this, and I don't have to worry about the dark stuff lifting, picking up. Does that make sense? So this just makes this stage a little bit easier than normal. Let me zoom in here then and get ready to do some painting. I've got 3 stages, 3 phases, 3 layers left in this particular painting. And the 3 layers today are going to be, number 1, the fuzz layer, transparent, local color, soft edges, I'm sorry, again I misspoke, translucent, local color, soft edges, and glow. Okay, that's the fuzz layer. And then I'm going to do one more drawing in pencils. This is partly because the earlier drawing that I did in the acrylic stage with pencils is still showing through a fair amount, so I don't feel the need to do pencils yet, but I will do some more pencil work as soon as I finish this fuzz layer. So this fuzz layer is try to keep all the edges soft. That is the name of this game. There's sort of a subtle difference, a real fine line between the fuzz layer and the final layer, which is light, opaque highlights. The biggest difference is the soft edge. And sometimes when I'm doing this layer, I accidentally do some hard edges, thereby bleeding over, if you will, into the final layer. And that's okay, but I just try to remind myself that the goal of this phase, this stage right here, is, see, like that edge right there is a little bit sharp, a little bit hard, so I'm actually going to come in there and fuzz it out with my finger. I do not have any cobalts or cadmiums on my palette. If I did, I would most certainly not paint with my fingers, but I think all the pigments I have on my palette are non-toxic, so I'm a little bit freer to use my fingers to paint. This fuzz layer, as you hear me calling it, is a fairly new introduction to my painting. It was just last July that I stumbled on this, and which is, by the way, at least how I discover most of my tricks in painting is I stumble on something. Sometimes, of course, I can take a class and learn something, or I can watch somebody on YouTube and learn something. But usually the best things that I learn accidentally while I am painting myself. As you can see, I'm adding a little bit of blue to the sky. I like the dark sky, but I want it to look like an artistic, what's the word? I want it to look like an artistic blue sky, not as if I'm trying to indicate dark, foreboding thunderstorms. Does that make, which it does right now. It looks a little bit too dark, just a little bit too dark. So I'm coming back and adding blue. Now, and again, I've got 2 more layers to go, unless I change my mind and do even more layers. That does happen, of course, sometimes. You think you've got a routine, you've got a process in place, but then something happens and you have to do more than 1 or 2 stages or layers. The 2 layers are, the next one is pencil. And again, if you're new to following me, yes, it is unusual to use pencils in an oil painting, and that's just part of my weirdness. that has, again, developed, evolved over the years. It was about, I think, 2.5 years ago now. So again, fairly recently, I was doing a whole bunch of abstract paintings in the summer of 2015, I think it was, or 2016. 2016. And in doing abstracts, which I enjoy very much, I introduced these grease pencils. Not a typical grease pencil, but Jumbo Jet Black, made by Jerry's Artorama. And it's an oil-based pencil. That's why I call it a grease. Not a typical, but a grease pencil is not a bad idea. I've tried with that too. I've experimented with that. Anyway, I enjoyed the effect so much. I enjoyed the contrast in my abstracts. I enjoyed the juxtaposition between smooshy paint strokes and scratchy pencil strokes. I just liked the contrast and liked it so much that then when I came back to my normal representational paintings, I said, you know what? I like those pencils, the look of that pencil so much in my abstract stuff. I'm going to try using it in my representational stuff. Sure enough, so far it has stuck. And for a long time I thought, well, maybe this is just a phase I'm passing through. But the phase is growing on me, not reducing. So I'm thinking it might be a permanent part of my technique, my repertoire. Okay, so I've just been doing sky, soft edges sky all this time. There's not an awful lot of fuzz that I need to do in this painting. I'm going to come in now and do some glow of her dress, because I definitely want it to look as though that is really glowing. So I'm cleaning these brushes and just discovered I don't have any rags up here. So I have paper towels, but no rags. Okay. So let me mix up some white and some... Thank you for loving the dress. Appreciate it. It's on its way to looking good, I believe. Not quite there yet, but well on its way. And again, here we are. I want glow. If you want something to look like it's bright, or like the sun is really hitting something, then you make soft edges, soft edges. That makes something look like it's glowing. And of course, I want her dress to glow. I'll come back and do hard edges in a little while. Very, very limited hard edges, but very important. I think that'll do there. Now, the last thing I want to do before I go to the pencils is I want to do just a little bit of glow on some of this architecture. Again, if I want it to look as though, it to look as though the sun is really bedazzling the top part of this gazebo, stone gazebo, then sun bedazzling means soft edges. And that is so important. All the great paint, all realistic painters know this. All students need to learn it. That a hard edge does not give the impression of bright sunlight. Now, so part of the reason that's confusing is that in a photograph, like now this is not bright sunshine. It's whenever the photographer took this picture, the clouds were between us and the sun. So it's soft, which is good for flesh tones, but it's not very good for, this is not very dramatic. I hope to make my painting much more dramatic than that. But your eye sees this line, like say up here, as a hard, razor-sharp edge in photography. It doesn't see this glow, but here in a painting, I'm adding all kinds of glow. Why is that? Well, because I can, and because I'm a lot better than a camera. Because I can make it much more dramatic than the photograph. And by the way, I am another liberty I'm taking is I want it to look as though the sun is hitting the top part of this gazebo, not down here. I don't want a lot of sunlight. A little bit down here, perhaps. I'm thinking. So I've literally got sun glow going into this man's suit, dark navy blue suit. A little bit of sun here, a little bit here. Again, wherever I want it to look like the sun is. Uh, the most important aspect of a representational painting, of course, is play of light, right? That should be a mantra to you. That's just the most important thing. The most important aspect of a representational painting is play of light. And some students think that refers to, quote, which way is the light coming from? Now let me help you here. Which way is the light coming from is not play of light. In fact, with my students, and if you follow me very much, you'll hear me say this more than once. I do not even allow my students to give themselves accolades for getting this riddle, this question right. The question is, which way is the light coming from? Now, I know that for many student painters, that's like a big deal. They have to really work to get that principle down in their painting. And my students, I want to say, nope, I will not cheer. I will not slap you on the back. I will not say, way to go, attaboy. And I usually give away a lot of attaboys when I'm teaching. I go, oh, that's great. Oh, good job. But I will not give attaboys for what ways light come from. Here's why. It's because I'm a good teacher, not because I'm a bad one. The reason is if a student gives themselves big kudos. Do you know that word? Kudos. Cheers, Yahoo, prizes, trophies, medals on their chest for Yahoo, Yahoo, Yahoo. Great credit for which way is the light coming from. If they give themselves a lot of credit for that, here's what will happen. They will say, yay, I have done it. And they will, in their inner person, they will sit down and say, yay, I have done play of light. When in fact, they haven't even entered the realm of play of light yet. So does that make sense? So I don't give you great credit for saying, way to go, you got the light coming from. No, just like, yeah, you better get that right. It's sort of like a football team. If you're in Europe, that means a soccer team for us Americans. In America, that means football team. Either one will work. It's sort of like which way is the light coming from can be compared to getting your football team onto the field. How many points does your team get for getting its members on the field? How many points does it get for? The answer is 0. And that's how many points you should give yourself. Now, I know I'm being kind of mean here, but it's because I don't want you, like so many other students, to then go, Yahoo, I've achieved something, and stop. No, you have not achieved anything. You got 0 points on the board. All you did is show up. You can get disqualified for not showing up. You can get disqualified for not answering that question correctly, but you don't get any points. So it's not until you get beyond that to play of light. So here's a corollary to that. I don't give you points for which way is the light coming from. Therefore, I don't even give you points, or myself either, of course, for sun hitting, quote unquote, sun hitting. Like the sun here is hitting this gazebo. Does that make sense? How many points do I give myself for that? 0. That's like, which way is the light coming from? And I know I know I'm being a little mean to some of you beginners because some of you, that's really a hard thing to achieve is which way is light coming from? Well, it shouldn't be a hard thing to achieve. And if I take that away from you, you'll go on to achieve better things. Okay, so the word sun hitting is not, I don't even give points for that. Here's why. That does not reflect play of light. Here's the kind of language in your brain, the kind of inner language I want you to say. Sun bedazzling, sun sparkling, sun blasting, sun ricocheting. Even that word's a little soft. It's got to be a dramatic, almost a violent word. Then we're talking play of light, not sun hitting. Got it? I know hitting sounds kind of violent, but it's so we use it so much that it's not a powerful enough word. So you need to use a powerful word so that you'll paint powerfully. I have just painted the beginnings of sun bedazzling off this stone gazebo. Does that make sense? Now it'll get more bedazzleish as as I go along. It'll get even, when I do the next layer, or the last layer, it'll be even more. Sparkling is a good word. Piercing is a good word. Exploding is a good word. You want sun exploding. Now, if it's a cloudy day, then no. Then it's a completely different kind of play of light. Isn't that right, Lake? Hey, my grandchildren are back in town. Can I point it at you, Lakey Poo? There's Lake. She's over there doing artwork at her table. Thanks, Sweetie Pie. And later, she's really excited because later today, I'm going to be drawing Lake. I'm doing illustrations for a book. And in the books, the star of the book is a 6-year-old girl, and Lake's 5.5. So I'm thinking that's close enough, okay? I can't wait. She can't wait either. Okay. Do I take a break? No, I'll just keep right on going. So I'm done with the fuzz layer. Does that make sense?
I'm making a book right now.
You are making a book? That's great. She's a very creative young woman. Okay, so next thing I'm doing here is pencils. And again, I've already talked a whole bunch about why I do pencils. So this is the 8th or 9th time that I have drawn this subject matter. And again, I point that out because I would like you to think, well, doggone, by the time you've drawn it 9 times, you should be getting pretty close to accurate. No, and that is correct. That is exactly correct. Each time I draw it, I get a little bit more accurate. Now, that only works if you have one very important principle clearly in mind. And that is, and this is hard for some students, so pay attention, getting better with each drawing only works if you, every time you draw it, you don't follow the previous drawing. Does that make sense? As long as you don't make your, which is hard because most people, once they've drawn something one time, they like to take breathe a big sigh of relief and say, whew, okay, I drew it. And then they trust their, may I say, erroneous drawing for all the subsequent steps. And that would be a huge mistake. The huge mistake, again, is in trusting the previous drawings. You don't trust them, you make adjustments. And as long as you're doing that, then each drawing will become a little bit more accurate than the one before it. By the way, it's unusual. I have a dark brown pencil in one hand and a black pencil in the other. The brown isn't quite as soft as the, of course it's not as dark, it's brown, but it's not as soft as well. And for that reason, I don't normally use the brown. But today, because I am drawing on top of my fuzz layer, I'm thinking I could probably get away with using a brown pencil. So we'll see. We'll see if but it's not, as again, it's not as soft So it doesn't leave nearly as definite a mark as the black does. I wish it were softer. I wish there's a manufacturing snag in whoever makes these. The fact that the brown is so much harder than the black, it's not a good, the product is not consistent. Okay. See, I like being able to, and I'm not sure this is going to work, I like being able to draw with two hands at the same time, but I'm not sure that the hard brown is going to allow me to do that. So there's this, in this photograph, there's real, very lacy, thin, I would call it wrought iron, but it's actually not wrought iron, it's actually bent iron lace up here in the top of the gazebo, and of course I want to hint of that in my painting. Let's just do some left-handed painting, drawing here. And of course there's this shallow relief carving going on in that stone, and I want to indicate that as well. Now, I'm not going to try very hard to replicate the exact shape of this wrought iron work up here. That would be, for my style of painting, that would be too much detail, too much realism. It would be improper for me to do that. Now, this is, I think, the third time in the last couple of weeks that I've sort of reversed the order of my last few steps. The normal order is I draw in pencil, and then draw in paint, or vice versa, and then do the fuzz layer, and then do the final layer. But in this is the third time, so I'm wondering if I'm experiencing a shift here that might stick. And that is, you know what? I am not liking this brown pencil. So if you will forgive me, I'm going to take a very short break. I mean, like 60 seconds, maybe less. Don't go away. I'm going to be back because I need to run downstairs. I'm in my upstairs studio today. I need to run downstairs and get another black pencil, okay? So I will be happier now. Disappointed that because I would love to draw in brown often, but it just isn't working. So I'm stuck doing two black pencils. Again, trying to make my drawing a little bit more accurate. Hey, speaking of accurate, let me give you a principle that evidently it's easy for. Let me go in here. By the way, I found a little piece of the architecture that ought to have some sun on it right there. Let me help you be a better artist, perhaps. Many students confuse, and I would say I'm still learning this. I'm still trying to internalize this. Many students confuse the concept of impressionism, impressionistic painting, with accurate or realistic painting. Here's what happens. Too many people think that impressionistic painting means that you don't have to be accurate. Close is good enough. And again, I think I am in fact learning the fallacy of that thinking. No, good impressionistic painting means the drawing, as much as you can, is dead on accurate, but not rendered fully. There's a huge difference. And most student impressionistic painting, impressionism is taken as an excuse or cop out for sloppy drawing, inaccurate drawing. And again, I'm learning this myself. I learn it partly by looking at the artists that I admire most, and I name these three come to mind most often: Jeremy Mann, Tibor Nagy, Eastern Europe, Romania, Slovakia, somewhere, and Richard Schmid. All of them very, especially with Jeremy Mann and Tibor Nagy, far messier than I am, if I can just use that non-artistic term. A lot messier than I am, but also, doggone it, more accurate than I am. And that's what makes me, if you will, that's what makes me drool over their paintings, is the accuracy with which they render. So yeah, don't make the mistake of thinking, well, I just do impression. Do you know why I'm going to blow your cover. Do you know why? I would guess the number is about 99%. Do you know why 99% of art students do impressionistic painting? Yeah, it's because they can't or won't take the time, the discipline to do accurate painting. And accurate drawing is what we're really talking about. And yes, I do think the number is very close to 99% of that's the reason most people do. In fact, some people call what they do, they call it Salvador Dali. What's it? Realism. What's it called? What's my funny brain sometimes. What's Salvador Dali's technique called? His style? Some kind of funny realism. Anyway, it'll come back to me in just a second. If one of you wants to tell me what the word is I'm looking for. Again, a lot of people do that kind of quote-unquote realism because they take it as an excuse to not have to work so hard. I'm being really painfully honest here and telling you the terrible truth for a lot of people. Surrealism. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Yeah, I saw your comment right at the same time that the word. Yeah. So impressionistic painting and surrealism. 99% of the people who do it is because they're too blankety blank lazy to learn how to draw well. And I'm being kind of mean here, but I'm being mean because I'm hoping somebody is listening that needs to hear that. Good impressionistic painting is good drawing, but rendered where the brushstrokes themselves are paramount or more important than the image. The viewer's brain, the viewer's mind finishes the image, but as much of the image as is there. I've got an electric eraser here, by the way. Get some lines on this girl's face that are going to really get in my way if I don't take them out right now. That's probably a trick you've never seen me do here before. Anyway, so this is for the last several years of my life, 7, 8 years, I've been on a conscious quest to achieve two opposing impulses. One is to make my paintings and drawings more accurate, anatomy more correct, cars in my paintings, buildings, perspective, everything more correct, and at the same time my paintings more, again to use that non-artistic term, more messy, more impressionistic. And I invite you to join me. If you want to do good painting, I think you will share my quest. Do not use Impressionism as an excuse for inaccurate drawing. Okay, and I've got my old phone here. I don't have, whoops. God, this is like, welcome to the world of oil painting. This wouldn't be so bad, except I've got a ring on that finger that's not going to come off really easily. So, I heard some from an old timer not long ago. I think it was Bob Burridge sitting at lunch, and he said, "Yeah, you know, when you go into a gallery and you tell the gallery owner you're an artist, they will look at your fingernails to see if you're really an artist." I thought that was funny and probably pretty accurate. Now, hang on just a minute. I have got a mess on my hands. The obvious answer to this is don't put your phone down on your paint palette. I wonder what I just plugged up there full of paint. I think it's the microphone jack. I better fix that later. Okay. As you can tell, I'm having problems here. Oh my goodness. Sometimes the magical phones that we use are slightly less than magical, aren't they? I'm still getting it, still putting it in my paint. Okay, now it's time, again, for instance, every time I draw this bride's behind, her derriere, it's been this way, it's been that way, it's been this way, it's been that way, it's been this way. Every time I'm going, no, I think it should be a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. I'm just using that as an obvious marker. And here I am. I've probably made my final determination as to where the back of this bride should go. I've got one more layer to change my mind. It's the last layer. Okay? But with each step, I'm hoping that I'm getting ever so slightly more precise, more accurate. Okay, I probably preached that sermon plenty long enough. You just beat it to death, didn't I? Same thing on this man's face. I've got one more layer to change my mind. Well, of course, unless this painting spills over into tomorrow, which is very, very possible that it could do. That's as, I don't know if you can see that, that's as tight as this photograph can go, and it's not very accurate. I mean, it's not very precise. It's low resolution. And so my painting is limited to, which is fine. I think this client, I already painted at her wedding last fall, and I did I think a respectable job of their painting, and it was about as realistic as this one's going to be. Okay, I am down to the last layer, yahoo, or I'm up to the last layer, as the case may be. And let me talk for just a second. Again, for those of you who are maybe following my technique, or at least you're interested in watching me do mine. The last layer is light, opaque. Some of the opacity gets thin and turns into translucent, but light, opaque highlights. The painting as it is right now is, or should be, 85 to 90% finished. If it's not, I've really screwed up everything I've done up to this point. And I have not. This is certainly 90% finished. I'm going to cheat right now, though. The last layer is light, opaque highlights. And after the drawing that I just did with those pencils, though, I have a few areas that I need to darken. So this is out of order, what I'm doing right now. I'll zoom in here, especially on the figures, the man's hair and the woman's hair. Need a little bit filling in. Also, her face needs a little dark, and her hair here needs to be rendered slightly. At the same time, I want to do some dark on the shady side of her arms, her arm, and a little bit of darkness, flesh tone on his face. So in a way, should have been done before now. Does that make sense? Technically. I'm supposed to be done with all the darks, but I got down here and said, oh, wait a minute, I'm missing some dark stuff. So there you go. You have a process, an ABC 1, 2, 3 procedure that you should generally keep in mind, but you're always painting with your eyes. You're never painting with the number. Okay, I think that'll do. A little bit down here in his hand. Okay. Now, once again, light, opaque highlights. Now, the question with this last stage is always where to start. I have 4 options. Where to start the final phase, and it's always a toss-up. Number 1, the traditional approach. Start with the furthermost object, which in outdoor scene is always the sky, furthermost object, and move forward. The mountain, the sky, the mountain, the hill, the tree, the barn, the horse in front of the barn, the fence in front of the horse, the weed in front of the fence. That's traditional painting. If it's all opaque, you just work this way. I hope that made sense to you. That was just the proverbial barn and proverbial horse. That's one approach. Start with the sky. Number 2, start with the lightest, brightest, whitest thing, which in this case is going to be her dress. That's a good option this time. Start with the dress, the lightest thing, and then kind of work back from that toward the midtones. Option number 3, start at the focal point and then work out like from the rings of a bullseye. That's my favorite medium. Good question, Harrison. Do you mean in oil or do you mean in acrylic? Let me answer that in just a minute. So the third option is start with a focal point, which in this case is clearly their faces, and move out. And the fourth option is to start with local color. That is, there may be some, it's not the case here, there may be some part of your painting that's significantly large and it's just not the right color, so you need to kind of knock that out before you know where to go from there. That is not the case. Sometimes it's foliage, trees, greenish, that needs that. But again, that's not the case here. So the 3 options are sky and move forward, white, and then go darker from there, the lightest thing, which is her dress, or their faces. And guess what? I'm going to start with their faces. Thank you, Harrison. So the answer is quite simple. For oil, my favorite is Liquid Original. For acrylics, my favorite is GAC 100, which I showed yesterday. If you go back to yesterday's broadcast, I showed you a bottle of that. Second place is Liquitex Gloss Medium and Varnish, because it works essentially just as well. I'm not sure it's quite as hard. The GAC 100 is a tiny bit more transparent and a little bit harder dry surface. This is noticeably cheaper, so that's a close second. So there you go, my 2 favorite mediums. Okay, I am going to do then, and for a little while, I'm going to paint with one hand, which really does drive me crazy. It's weird how much it bothers me, but there are times it can't be done. So I'm mixing up, first of all, some pale blue, the color of the sky, because right here between their noses is a bit of sky. The shape of this is very important. It's essentially a triangle. So let me carve this, that little, what I just made, let me carve it into a more of a triangle with the end of my brush. What I'm doing right now is classic Betty Edwards drawing the right side of the brain. I'm not painting their faces. I'm painting around between their faces in order to convey their faces. Does that make sense? Thanks, Harrison. Good to have you. Thanks for asking a good question. Okay, that's pretty close. I'm going to clean this brush because, well, I'll do more blue later, but right now I want to go straight to doing some flesh tones. So let me mix up a medium flesh tone, not the lightest. By the way, in this final phase layer, you can do more than one layer. You can do an opaque bit of color. Let me zoom in for you. There you go. And then come back later, of course, and do a darker bit of, a lighter, not darker, a lighter bit of color. More on that later. Okay, so now that I'm really getting serious about their faces, behold, I discover another bit where I need some more dark. So once again, I'm violating. I don't mind doing it. I just want to make sure you understand that I'm stepping outside of my normal ABC 1, 2, 3 process to do some dark. She has a big curve of hair, comes down over her forehead, and actually down in front of her cheek. And I am not completely happy. I can't get, there's a line here that I want to get rid of. I'm actually going to cheat and use my pencil as if it were paint. I don't know if I've ever done that. I'm actually using my pencil to make something darker. By the way, one of the reasons I like these pencils, I'll show it, since I'm mentioning it, I'll show it to you again. One of the reasons I like these are made by Jerry's Artorama. Hey Barbara, nice to have you on board. Jumbo Jet Black. One of the reasons I like them is they're essentially an oil-based pencil, but they play well. They interact with both water media, acrylics, and oil media, both. They don't act quite the same, but they work very well. There's a nice symbiotic cooperation with them, with both the acrylics and the oils. What you just saw me do just a minute ago, whereas I actually used the pencil to color in an area right here. And I'm very confident that that is archivally stable because because it's an oil-based pencil, and I just ground it into a little bit of liquid, and in other words, turned the black pencil into a little bit of oil paint, essentially. What I'm hoping to achieve here, pick up a little bit of red for this man's ear. What I'm hoping to achieve here is accurate rendering. And I don't want, I don't want his ear accidentally in the wrong place. I don't want anything like that happening. But I also don't want to, what's the word? Draw the heck out of this thing. I want to be able to achieve the image without, and let the viewer's eye complete the image rather than me doing all the work. That's good Impressionism. So as you can see, this is pretty detailed stuff for an impressionistic painting. Of course, their faces are far and away will be the most realistic part of the painting. But even that, I don't want it. This is not going to be, hopefully, a whole bunch of tongue painting like I did 2 days ago when I was doing that was different, just a different style painting. That was more realistic. I want this. Yeah. That's actually looking pretty good. And by the way, if you're an artist, I think you understand that tone of voice. That's not bragging. That's a slight voice of surprise. It's like, how about that? This might actually work. What a surprise. I think if you're an artist, you understand that. It's like, dang, I'm good. No. It's like, wow, this might actually work. Golly, what a shock. Can it, you artists, you relate to what I'm saying there? Okay, I've just mixed up, some color that is the color of the stone gazebo. Behind their faces. And again, by painting this, what's behind their faces, I am trying to render their faces. Thank you, Heather, for answering questions for me. Thank you very much. Let me repeat one of my mantras. Bears repeating, I believe. And I don't want to be confusing, so let me be clear here. I've already said emphatically this morning that the most important aspect of a painting is play of light. Okay? The most important aspect of a painting is play of light. Now, the most important, no, let me say it this way, the essence of the act of painting, the essence of doing the act of the verb painting. See, the word, it's confusing in English because we have the same word for both. It's a noun and a verb. A painting is something you hang on a wall, and painting is something that you do. So it's a little confusing. So now I'm talking about the verb. Painting is something you do. The essence of good painting, doing good painting, the essence of good painting is making interesting marks. I'm trying to, by the way, while I'm talking, I'm mixing up a warmer flesh tone here for the woman's cheek. So the essence of good painting is making interesting marks. Now that, of course, means when the painting is finished, then back to the noun, then the finished painting is a collection of interesting marks. Now I could use the word beautiful, but that gets us into a kind of a philosophical quagmire that I don't want to enter. I want to be more scientific and analytical than that. So that's why I'm not using the word beautiful marks. If that would be appropriate to say beautiful marks. But I want to make it, again, for you artists, I want to make it even more objective, measurable. Your marks must be interesting. Every mark should be interesting. Now, that's a whole lifetime of exploration to determine what doth an interesting mark make. I may slip suddenly into archaic English. Just to make a point. What doth an interesting mark make? That's another question. But I'm not going to answer that right now. Let me just leave that and get to the next point. Is if your marks are, I'll use the word pleasant. If your marks are pleasant, then the person, hello from Argentina. Hello, Geronimo. What a great North American name from Argentina. I presume that you understand that in America, the word Geronimo has very, very, very significant history, right? I'm assuming you understand that. I didn't realize that people in Argentina sometimes were named Geronimo. What a beautiful name. And it's a rich history in America. A very famous Indian, Native American warrior named Geronimo. And once again, it gets us, all of us white people, appropriately into paroxysms of repentance for what we have done to the native peoples. I take it to be a very appropriate paroxysms of repentance, by the way. We have a lot to be sorry for, but you know what? So does every other race on the planet. So, you know what I mean? Anyway, that doesn't mean we shouldn't still be sorry for the horrible things our ancestors did. I absolutely believe we should. Anyway, Geronimo, good to have you on board. Okay, so back to interesting marks. If your marks are pleasant, this is worth you seeing my face. I know how much you love to see my face. Okay, listen. If your marks are pleasant, let me act this out and plug in my phone that needs to be charging while I'm talking. If your marks are pleasant, then when someone looks at your painting, their inner person, can I say their soul, but inner psyche, whatever you want to call it, I don't want to be too freak you out, but their inner person relaxes. Oh. They look at your painting and say, this person knew what they were doing. I can rest and look at their painting because they're marks. It's not because it's accurate. It's because the marks are varied, bold, masterful, confident, and so forth. I think Rembrandt, John Singer Sargent, Franz Hals. And in that relaxed state, and this is what I hope to achieve in every painting, when they relax, then their brain, in this case, will turn this into a man's face and a woman's face. Let me zoom in now on the painting. If I make my marks good, pleasant marks, then I don't have to explain everything in this painting, because the viewer, their inner person, will rest, will relax, will take a deep sigh, a deep breath and sighs like, oh, that's nice. And in that relaxed state, their brain will turn this into a man and a woman's face. If my marks are not very pleasant, that will not happen. If the marks are stultified, one of my favorite words, as you'll discover, if the marks are uncomfortable, irregular, stiff, contrived, overworked, all of these words, then they will not rest. And in their irritated state, they will not turn the marks into a woman's face. So that is the balance that we, the artists, are always striving to achieve. We're always trying to find that sweet spot between accurate rendering and pleasant marks. Okay, I've got one more. Thank you, Carolyn. Kiarolyn? Beautiful name. I'm sure I'm not saying it right. I'm so sorry. Beautiful name. Okay, I got out my small brush. I'm going to do a tiny bit of what I call tongue painting here. And it is to just give a hint of her mouth, of her teeth. And to do that, of course, I'm not going to mix up white. I'm going to mix up a medium gray, probably a slightly warm gray. And I hope I can do this with one stroke. And it has to be in the right place. I think that will do. Now, yeah. I know you can't see that. I'm so sorry. Here, just one second. I'll pick you up and let you see the painting more up close, so you can actually see what's going on here. Hang on a second. I'll get it aimed in the right direction in a moment. Okay. So that's what I've got so far for their faces. And I think it's pretty accurate to the photograph. Here's the photograph. I guess I'll let you see them both side by side. Got it? So there's where I'm at. It's not a portrait of him in particular. I'm not sure in this painting that I want a portrait per se. I hope my client is not expecting a portrait. I'm hoping they're expecting a painting that represents him, but isn't a contrived rendering of him. I'm going to leave their faces for a moment now. I still have to paint with one hand, just again kind of irritating. Let me outline the back of his head, not by painting the back of his head, but by painting the sky behind him. Now here's one of the things I meant to say earlier when I was doing the pencil drawing. And in this painting, the pencil drawing was the next to the last. By the way, we have a word for that in English language. It's called the penultimate, which means that next to the last step of the painting process was pencil. And whenever I finish a pencil stage of painting, I consider my painting to be too liney, to be too drawer-ish, to be too much, have too many lines in it. But I don't worry about it, because in this final stage of the painting process, I'm going to be smudging out quite a large number of those pencil lines. Okay, I think that'll do. Let me do the back of her head. And I think I'm done with the most fiddly part of this painting, which of course is the focal point, which is their faces. So I'll put down this other phone in a moment and hopefully get back to doing some good painting with two hands. And by the way, I literally paint better with two hands. This goes back to my discussion about interesting marks. I don't paint more accurately necessarily with two hands, although my left hand has caught up an awful lot in recent years. So that if I was forced to, I could paint pretty much as literally, as accurately as I need to with my left hand. But that's not the reason I'm using my left hand most of the time. It's not for accuracy. It's for interestingness. I make up and words again, I use my left hand because my left hand helps make my marks more interesting. Okay? While I am here, while I am in this area, though, let me go ahead and finish this man's shirt collar. Are you getting a lot of static? Thank you. Let me change here. I'm getting a lot of static as well. Well, I can't hear it, but I can see it. So let me turn this off. I think you can probably hear me all right. Yeah, thank you, folks. High on my list of things to buy real soon is a much more expensive microphone, which dismays me somewhat because the one I've got is not cheap, but it's clearly not working. So if some of you would buy a couple of my paintings, then I could afford to buy an expensive microphone. Which, by the way, if you're interested, is from my research, is a Sennheiser wireless, battery-operated wireless microphone, which I should have bought the first time. Doing really fiddly stuff now. Oh, before I proceed, I just uncovered another little tiny area where I need to come back again out of order and do some dark detail, and that is the man's suit. You probably can't even see this. The far side of his suit, if I may use that term. The breast of his suit on the far side of his shirt needs to be darkened. Okay, that'll probably do. I'll continue with some of the details. All right. Now I think I can start painting properly again. Let me begin to tackle her dress. Nope, don't want to do that. I want to tackle, speaking of tackling, I want to tackle her arm. So we'll work our way down from their faces to their arms. That may be the case, Heather. I know the battery doesn't last very long, and I tend to lose track of how long I've been using it. That may be very much exactly the case. And I need instead to take more breaks and plug it in between each. Thank you for that tip, because I think you might be right. So here again, I'm making judgments of, again, maybe I can zoom in a little bit more. Yeah. Again, here's where I do not want to. I did pencil lines, was the next to the last thing I did, right? But it was the next to the last thing I did. That means I have one more veto power, to put it that way. I have one more opportunity to correct my drawing. And there is definitely something psychological about knowing that this should be the last step, the last stage of the painting process. It puts me on hyper alert, like, no, wait a minute. Is that, in all the previous drawings, I know I've got one more layer left. So I tend to be a little bit sloppy. And by the way, I think that's the right way to be, is sloppy, so to speak. But now all sloppiness is over. This is the last statement. So I'm asking myself, is it accurate? In other words, I'm not just coloring or trusting or relying on or believing even the pencil lines that I just did a few minutes ago, which even as I was doing them, I was telling you, I think this is accurate. But now I'm going, oh, no, wait a minute, wait a minute. I'm not sure. See, I'm not sure about this line right here. I think it might be a little high. So I'm actually going to come back, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know. And there's a slight lightness on her arm because I want it to some degree, without getting crazy, reflect anatomical details, of course. I'm going to do something I don't do very often. Picking up a clean brush just to blend. I'm not a big believer in blending. It's usually a bad impulse. Beginner painters need to learn how to paint without blending. I just did some blending right there, but it's very rare. I'm making the point that it's an unusual thing. I can't remember the last time I did it, as a matter of fact. That's how unusual it is. Okay, I think that's good. Yahoo! Cleaning some brushes over here. By the way, again, for those of you joining me perhaps late, my grandchildren they were gone for 2 months and they are back with their parents, living in our house for a while. So I escape. I love my grandchildren, ages 7, 5, 3, and 1. Good to have them back. But it's also good to be able to come up into my upstairs studio and close the door and get some fairly quiet work done. You saw my granddaughter Lake. She's a 5-year-old. Every one of them is just, of course, as precious as they can be. We just love them to death. But that doesn't mean I can get a lot of work done if I'm in their space. So I get out of their space, let them have free run of the house, and I just try to hole up in my upstairs studio. Yes, I am a very, very, very blessed man. I might bear a little tiny bit of explanation. Why do I have 2 studios in my house? Which in fact I do. The reason is because most of our adult life, and certainly most of the 30 years that we've lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, I worked as a freelance illustrator. And I still do some illustration, enjoy it very much. It's a nice diversion. And in all those years, I always had a studio in our home, and it was an illustration studio. Quite different from an oil painting studio. An illustration studio, first, most of my work was done sitting down. I have an entire table dedicated to airbrush. It's over to my left, and at the moment it's buried. Oh, just for fun, sure, I'll turn you around and so you can look at it. There's my airbrush table buried. There it is, buried under a mountain of stuff. But there's some of my airbrushes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. I guess that's a pretty good representation. A few more. There's some of the inks and so forth. Anyway, that is my airbrush table. And then behind me, I have a desk, like a business desk with a computer on it, and then an illustration desk. Okay, so why do I have 2 studios? Because one is an illustration studio, and then when my wife went shopping for this house 11 years ago, she was looking for a house. By that time, I was doing mostly fine art, and she wanted a house that had a downstairs master bedroom and a downstairs paint studio. Bless her heart. So, but I use both offices quite a bit. Both. Sometimes I call this my office, SOS, to use a different term. All that has absolutely nothing to do with anything, but since you're my friends and you're watching, let me blab on. But I do recognize that I'm extremely blessed. Most people don't have one studio in their house, let alone two. So I'm standing back and looking at. I think I'm okay. I think that's okay. I was looking at the values, the lightness here. Let me zoom in again so you can see a little bit better. The lightness, you know, am I achieving the overall composition that I want? And I think that I am. Hello, Carolyn. Yeah, certainly I'll do a tour. That's a good idea. Showing you my various tools and materials, some tricks of the trade. Thank you for that suggestion. I will do that. Now, I don't know if you mean my upstairs studio or my downstairs one. Or probably both. I have tricks of the trade in both places. Good. Thank you, Warren. You're very kind. Okay, Yahoo! I am finally ready to start tackling her dress, which, as you know, is a major, the major next to the psychological focal point of their faces. And that is certainly the psychological focal point are their faces. But at a very close second, a visual focal point is really her dress. And it is 90% finished. All I need to do, I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit more. There's a bit of pencil line showing at the top of her arm, which I do not like. Or at least not that much of it. There. Much better. Now, I love the texture that is already her dress. All I need to do is hit a few highlights, and let me show you a photograph real quickly of what her dress looks like. See, it's covered with, I don't even know what this is called. I'm sure it's got some beads in it, or forgive me, women, I don't know what the name for that kind of thing is, but it's covered with details, covered with texture. And I want to try to indicate that, of course, without drawing it. I want to just hint at it so that the viewer gets the impression that the bride's dress had this filigree. Heather, I understand exactly. That is most people. You're relegated to a corner of the dining room or the kitchen table or something, right? Which, if you live by yourself, it's not too difficult, I'm thinking. But if you have anybody else in the house, it can get problematic really quickly. Bless you. Yeah. Aha. I am liking the looks of that. Now, down here, in this part of her dress, wait a minute, before I go any further, I need to mix up a slightly darker version of that dress color. A little bit of brown, a little bit of ultramarine, still not quite the color I want, a little bit of, whoops, a little bit. By the way, so let me show you my palette while I'm doing this. Did you hear that? Whoops. There was a little bit of Indian yellow. Whoops, too much Indian yellow. And I say that because, again, I want you students to understand you're not you're not the only one that does that. Don't be thinking that, oh, if I was just real good, I would never accidentally mix up the wrong color. Are you kidding? I would like to say it happens to the best of us, but I clearly am not among that number of best. I'm okay, I'm pretty good. But my impression is it happens to the best of them, if I can be that selfie facing for a moment. Yeah, it happens to everybody. You're mixing along and all of a sudden your brush just picks up, one too many hairs worth of whatever color. It's like, oh my goodness. Then you have to keep mixing and add, you know. So I've got a dirtier white. It could be called beige or tan or dirty gold color on my brushes. Still opaque and still fairly light. But for this, I want to do this because I don't want to do light like I was doing up here and then come back and do dark on top of it. Because why? Because the human eye, now this is not watercolor. This rule applies only acrylic to the opaque media of oil and acrylic. Our eye does not like seeing dark paint on top of light paint. We just don't like it. We do not like to see dark paint on top of light paint. We like to see light paint on top of dark paint. So one of the common adages perhaps you've heard that reflects that reality is darks first, lights last. And that is a good rule. Darks first. Hey Izzy, I didn't even hear you come in. Do you want to say hi to my friends?
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, I could tell. There's Israel. Hang on. Hang on. Let me get your face. There you go. Say hi, Israel.
Hi.
How old are you?
7.
Do you have new teeth? Let me see your new teeth. And do you have some missing?
I lost one.
How many? Yeah, you just the other day. How many do you have missing? 4 right now?
4 right now.
Yeah. But your new teeth came in front. You look so much bigger now. And how come you're wearing your Seattle Seahawks sweatshirt?
It's the only.
Because it's cold outside. Ha, that's a joke. No. Why are you wearing Seattle Seahawks?
It's the only what's it called?
Football.
Football shirt, and under this one I have a Panthers.
Oh.
No, not a Panthers. Another Seahawks.
Oh, yeah, another Seahawks.
T-shirt.
Really?
T-shirt.
You're wearing 2 of them? But why? Tell people why Seattle? How come? Because where did you used to live?
In Spokane, and my dad really liked it, so I really liked that team too. But now he doesn't like it, and he already bought me these. So
there you go. Very good. Yes, Izzy and his parents and all of his siblings. Just Miss Heather says hi, Izzy.
I need a Panther shirt.
Yeah, you do. So they just moved here from the state of Washington a few months ago.
And why?
Yeah, more than a few months ago. So we're very happy to have them back on this side of the country instead of way far away. Okay, I was saying that we don't like seeing dark on top of light. We like seeing light on top of dark. And so just a few minutes ago, I did some mid-tone on her dress. Now I'm back. I've mixed up a lighter, brighter, whiter color. And I want to come back and do a little bit on top of that mid-tone that I did. Do you see? That makes us happy. We like seeing light on top of dark. We don't like seeing dark on top of light. As you know, Heather, who does watercolor, none of that applies to watercolor. And I love watercolor. I was a watercolor major in college back in the middle of the last millennium. That's an exaggeration. But to say close to the middle of the last century is almost not an exaggeration. Oh, it's fun to get old.
Oh man.
Okay, you don't have to talk anymore, Izzy. That's all right, buddy. Thanks. Did somebody mess up one of your works?
No.
You're good. Okay. Hey, Harrison. Whoa. Harrison, very cool, man. About to go off to major in art, study art? Good for you, man. Thank you. Yeah, I'd be delighted to be one of the voices in your art life. Thank you for letting us know. And as you can see, I broadcast almost every day. So like there's a lot of stuff, and I try not to say too much stupid stuff. uh, um, there. I'm fairly happy with that. Oh, there's just down here a little bit too much pencil showing. So I'm just going to take this brush and these brushes and just smudge out just enough. Not as if I'm angry at the pencil. That would make me get grumpy and paint poorly. But I pretty much dived a little bit between this man's legs. His suit, oh yeah, tiny bit. Let's do some of that. Sure, let's do it right now. So I'm going to just wipe off these brushes. And mix up a very dark, opaque blue. Okay, so this is a good time, by the way, to show you the difference. What I mean by if you want your painting, some part of your painting, so in this case, it's going to be the man's suit, which is almost pitch black here. Does that make sense? Almost pitch black. So I'm going to mix up a color that is very dark blue, but it has a tiny bit of white in it. What does the white do? It makes it opaque. And if I put this, so I've got, if I put this opaque dark blue color anywhere on the painting where the painting is currently lighter than this, it would look like mud. Oh, by the way, I haven't finished that woman's hair either, so I need to come back. But because I'm going to apply this to an area that's darker, it will not look like mud. Again, we like seeing light paint on top of dark, and that's a relative term, of course. What is light and dark? Well, it's compared to what's already on the canvas. When I say we like to see light on top of dark, for instance, that does not mean we like to see, you know, yellow on top of, I'm not talking about colors at all. It's all relative compared to what's already on the canvas. So even though what's on my brushes, if you glanced at it really quickly, you might even think what is on my brushes is black. See, look, that looks black, but it's lighter than what's on the canvas already. So it comes off looking just the right color. Yeah, it looks much better. Now probably, here's another trick, I've mentioned it many times, I'll say it again. Anytime, once we've entered the opaque stage, the opaque phase of the painting process, which if you're a traditional oil painter, the whole thing is opaque phase, but of course that's not how I like to paint. Most of my painting is transparent, so I'm in the opaque phase now. Now here's the rule. Once you've put down a color, opaque color, it's almost always a good idea to come back to mix up a color slightly lighter than what you just put down and come back and do a second, little bits of detail here and there and here and there, slightly lighter than what you just put down. So that's what I've done. I just added, gotta do this one with my left hand. Just added a little bit of white to what was already on my brushes. In fact, I'm afraid it might be a little bit too bright, but I think I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna be a little bit brave. Force myself to do some highlights. So the top, as you can imagine, the top of this man's sleeve is catching just a little bit more light than the sides and the bottom. So I'm hitting some highlights there. Also back here, just a little bit lighter. And down here, actually, a little bit lighter. I sounded like Bob Ross for a second there. Happy little wrinkles. Okay, I'm gonna let that go. I may come back and touch up later. What was I saying? The woman's hair. That's right. I haven't done really anything. Let's take a look at the woman's hair. Yes, it does have some lighter brown highlights. So basically the same concept of what I just did on the man's suit. My wrinkles are too evenly spaced. Boy, that's such an easy mistake to be too regular in our painting. So easy to make that mistake. Okay, now mix up some brown, dark brown highlights. And what color are they? Yeah, a little bit of red in that, and oxide red is red enough. Okay, and I'm gonna look at the photograph. Oh, and she also has a tiara kind of thing in her hair, and I have not done that, so I certainly need to do that. Just some little ringlets, indication of ringlets coming down this side. Little tiny bit down here, and again, there's some pencil lines, a little bit too much pencil right here, so that's a good opportunity to cover those up just a little bit. And a little bit on the top of her head, not much. Oh, and his hair as well. You can use a little bit of brown here at the temples and behind his ear. One thing, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'll need a dark spot inside his ear, just a tiny. There we go. Yahoo! I think I'm going to be happy. Izzy, I think I'm going to like this painting. That's always a good thing, isn't it? It's always a good thing when you like what you've done. Okay, mixing up a medium dirty white here for this tiara thing in her hair. It's not extremely visible, so I don't want it to be. That might be enough right there. That is lovely. Let me just for fun, let me bring you guys in again. Hang on for a bumpy ride for a second here. And there we go. There's the face. Does that look like a bride and groom? What do you think, Izzy?
Yeah.
Does that look like a bride and groom? I think it does. I'm quite happy with that degree of abstraction. Did you have a suggestion for me? What is it?
Do you think, are you going to do like the whole painting like lighter? Like you said, is it, can it mix up white on top of black or black on?
Yeah, light on top of dark. Exactly, you're correct. That is what we want.
So is that what you're doing right now? Like
yes, I am.
Doing dark on like around the bride and groom, and then later you're gonna make it brighter?
Nope, not very much. Like you're looking at the photograph and how bright it is. So here's what I think Izzy is saying. When you look at the painting, come on just a little bit, see how dark it is compared to the photograph. And the answer is no. My painting absolutely kicks butt. Sorry for that bad word there, Izzy. I mean, in my opinion, the painting is massively better than the photograph. Precisely because. Now, what I am going to do, Izzy, is make sure that I've got the light bits right exactly where I want them. And I am going to make more light bits. In fact, I'm mixing up. It's time to do the final details on this architecture. And whereas the last thing I did, well, the last thing I did was pencils, but right before that, I did my fuzz layer. I was trying to do translucent and soft edges. Now I'm doing opaque and hard edges. And of course, only a tiny bit of the architecture requires this treatment. When I'm teaching a class, where I'm teaching my students to do my style of painting, when I'm teaching a class and we get to this stage of the painting process, the final layer, which by the way is, even though it only covers 15, 10 to 20% of the canvas, 20 is probably too much. Anyway, I tell my students there are two rules that I give them to try to keep them from ruining their painting. One rule is only 15% of their canvas is allowed to have any opaque paint on it. Now that, by the way, that 15% does not include translucent layers. Like sometimes if there's a large sky, you can do a thin translucent layer of sky, and that does not go into the 15%. But there's two rules. One is the 15%, and you just have to gauge and guess how much is 15%. The other is you cannot put down any more than 2 strokes that touch each other before you have to leave a gap between that stroke and your next one. And I pretty much follow that, not slavishly, but I follow that general guideline. For instance, I just put that stroke. I'm going to see if I can get you guys closer because I'm really doing small stuff now and I would like you to be able to see it. You are in my way now, but I'll try to work around you. So you see that stroke that I just put up there? No other stroke that I apply now will touch or intersect that one. And in fact, I just put down right just this second 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little dabs of paint, none of which are touching. I'm going to continue that. In other words, I am very protective of the underpainting. I want to preserve as much of it as possible. It's sort of like, for you watercolor painters, it's sort of like I have an analogy, and forgive me, it's rather dramatic and awful to think about. But imagine you are in a car, an automobile, that is driven off the bridge into the icy waters of whatever, the river, Potomac. And you are inside the passenger cabin. And the car is filling up with water. You take off your seatbelt as the passenger compartment fills up with water. You get your head up close to the ceiling, and the smaller that bubble of air gets, the more desperate you are to stay inside that bubble. That is an awful analogy, but here's what it is. In the world of watercolor, that bubble is your white paper. That's how passionately you protect, in my opinion, how passionately you protect the whites on your watercolor painting. And somebody just left a comment there and I missed it, so sorry. So in this case, it's sort of the opposite. The whites that I am creating are that remaining bubble of air. The tendency is to make way too much of it. Okay, let me now move around this part of the architecture. I'm going to back you out in a minute, let you see the bigger picture so you can see what I'm looking at. Because I believe just that little bit that I did. See, if I turn off my brain, I'll start doing this. I'll come down this column and then this column and then this column, and I'll start coming around here. And I think all of that would be a misguided impulse. I'm achieving with just that little bit of detail that of highlights. I am pretty much achieving the effect I'm looking for. Let me back you out again so you can see the whole painting. Do you see what I'm talking about? Now, this is getting, yes, a lot of attention. And that's what I want. Now the lighting on this scene is dramatic. Anybody want to tell me the most important aspect of a painting is what? Play of light. And sun hitting this stone gazebo is not adequate. It is sun dancing, bedazzling, refracting, sparkling off just certain highlighted areas. That's what play of light means. Does it make sense? Does it make sense, Izzy?
Yep.
And by the way, I'm also being quite careful not to get to have too many hard edges with this bedazzling. Yeah. It's a real delicate balance. I want to keep a balance between, I'm going to bring just a little bit of this highlight in between their chins down here. It's a real balance. How much light is too much? I want to do a little bit, definitely on this column. Again, the tendency almost always, though, is to do too much, is to say too much. And I sort of speak, I'm preaching myself that sermon, even as I, so to speak, preach it to you. I'm saying that, so hopefully I won't forget. The tendency is to do too much, to say too much, to explain too much, to paint too much, to cover too much. I don't think I'm doing it yet. Of course, one never thinks one's doing it until one's done it. And then it's too late. Are you with me? Anybody had that experience?
I have when I draw.
Yeah. So one of the solutions is to step back off and squint or take one's glasses off. See the big picture. Now, I have work that I need to do on the rest of this painting. I'm not finished here, but I'm definitely doing the focal point. I'm definitely doing the highlights. And I think I'm quite happy. One thing I'm not happy with is there's this dark bit up here is just too dark. So I'm going to mix up some medium brown. So slight, it's still a light brown, but it's darker than what I've been doing. That was that, yeah. Okay, and I think I'm just about to the point where I'm going to paint without you people, my friends, for a while. And I'll bring you back in later. Let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to mix up some medium brown, I shouldn't say much, considerably darker than what I've been using up here. And to clean up, there's too much lines down here, there's too much busyness. I actually need to push the energy of this back a little bit by coming in with some opaque painting, but we're doing a lot of fuzzy painting. So in a sense, going back to the fuzz layer. But yeah, thank you. I think I'm going to do a little bit of blue coming off the top of this. I'm just thinking out loud with you here. Let me zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about. Here's a good example. You see this dark line right here is dry. I did that yesterday. And I like it. It's just too much of a good thing. So I've mixed up a medium dull brown here. And I'm going to push that line back. I'm actually reducing the amount of energy. Well, energy is one of my favorite words when it comes to describing painting. You know, why did you make that mark? Because it needed energy. Is a typical thing that will come out of my inner talk, if not my outer talk. See? Yeah, that's better. So I just reduced, and I need to do quite a bit of that here and there. Now, having just done that, I now say, wait a minute. I think I removed a shadow that I want to keep on the bottom side of this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so again, I could keep on blabbing at you. Never underestimate my capacity for blabbing. But I will be back in a little while. I need to paint without your company for just a little while. I'm very close to finish with this, and I'm, I think, quite happy with the, you know, this is what they sent me, and this is what I'm ending up with. This will probably end up, I'm quite sure this will end up on my wedding painting promotional materials. This will be good. Thanks for your company. I'll be back in a little while. Almost finished completely with this painting, this quick little portrait, wedding portrait. Just a few bits of touch up I want to do here and there. A little bit more light under her arm here. Want a little bit more, I hope I don't get carried away with little things. A little bit of light on the back of his hand down here. Yeah, that was nice. A little bit of light across her knuckles right there. Yeah. Let me look at her face now. So I need, yeah, a little bit of light on her cheek right here. Almost too much. There we go. There we go. Yes, a little bit of light on the back of her thumb. Right here, this part that points toward the sunlight. Get it right there? Yeah, there we go. Let me look at the tip of his thumb. I guess it's all right. Okay, little bit of highlight. Again, this is the kind of finishing stuff you do, is little tiny bits of light on his pocket handkerchief there, and on his shirt collar, and tiny bit here on the front of his shirt. There we go. I think that'll do. Same kind of thing. To zoom in here, just a little bit on the highlights on her dress. By the way, having done that, I think I want to add a little bit more glow to this dress. Soften that edge a little bit. Yeah. Okay. I think that'll do for the bride and groom. Now, perhaps the last thing I need to do, is I need to add a little bit of light to the sky. One of the things I did when you weren't watching is I added some green, an opaque, very mid-tone green down here, and just scumbled it in. But of course, green is in some cases I was putting opaque green on top of paint that was slightly lighter than that, which is a no-no, right? You don't put dark opaque on top of light. Don't make me repeat all that again. You don't put, if you follow me, you know you don't put opaque paint on top of something slightly lighter, which I did. So now I'm going to atone for my errant ways by coming in here and adding You are actually in my way there. You and my camera. I'm going to do some light sky adjacent to, but that's a key word, right next to the light, the dark stuff, I'm sorry, that I put down with the green. Coming back with the pale, with the blue, basically sky holes and sky along the edge of the trees, along the edge of the foliage. And then all will be well. Then I get away with my breaking the rule of putting dark on top, opaque dark down, coming back and okay, I think I'm done. And again, just for comparison, here is the photograph and there's the painting. I think it's better. I know you do too. I'm just going to do one more thing, and that is sign my painting. And I will post this probably on, just for fun, I'll post it on YouTube Community so you can see the finished image. And I'll certainly post this one on my Wedding Painter website. Thanks you guys for watching. I hope to do another broadcast later today. Sorry for all the upheaval here. Hope to do another broadcast later today while I am drawing Lakey Poo. He's sitting right over there.
Hi.
She's so excited about me drawing her. And I'm excited about drawing her too. Thanks. Bye.